ऑन है बट वो ब्लैंक दिख रहा है।
हाँ वो आ गया
आ गया। अच्छा हाँ इस तरह से मैंने अभी ठीक 246 पे बंद कर दूंगी। आप ठीक है स्टार्ट कर दूंगी। ठीक है
Hello, Dr. Anurima, have you joined? Is there Dr. Anurima joined? Yeah. Okay. Welcome, ma'am. Should we start the session then? Ma'am, unmute yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Now it's audible.
Yes.
So, wait 1 minute, ma'am. 1 minute. So now we are going to start the session. Just 1 second. So good afternoon, dear faculty members, distinguished personalities and research scholars. This is the 8th session of day 2. And I'm Dr. Apeksha, Assistant Professor in the Department of English from Galgodias University, and I'm joining today as the moderator of this session. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, who is going to talk to us about the benefits of effective blueprinting in academic writing. As we all of us know, that blueprinting helps the teachers in designing the instructional strategies as per the guidelines planning to meet the curriculum expectations and learning objectives. Hence, the importance of blueprinting cannot be unheeded. And so this session is going to be super cool with the dialect of Dr. Anurima. So it is with special excitement that I'm pleased to welcome and introduce Dr. Anurima. She is currently working as an assistant professor in the Department of English of Birsa Munda College, North Bengal University. Before this, she worked at the Center for Writing and Communication, Ashoka University, working closely with ESL students. She completed her doctorate in Indian English Children's Literature from JNU. She was a pre-doctoral Dart Fellow at the University of Würzburg, Germany. Apart from being a literary translator, she also writes for children and has been published with Scholastic and DK, among others. So please, all of you, join me in welcoming Dr. Anurima. We would be grateful if you all fill and submit the feedback form after the session. If you have any queries related to the discussion, kindly leave your questions in the chat box. We will come to your queries in the last 5 minutes of the session. Ma'am, now the floor is all yours. You can start your session.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank Galgotia University and Dr. Mansi Sinha specifically for extending this invite to me to speak at this 7-day, a 1-week-long faculty development program, which is being organized at such a grand scale by Galgotia University in collaboration with the Jean Monnet Module School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. And it's my honor to be, part of this, this grand initiative. Thank you so much. I just need to share my screen. So just give me 2 seconds. Okay, is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, so as Dr. Apeksha was mentioning, I'm going to talk today about the benefits of effective blueprinting in academic writing. From the final schedule, I see that this has been a day of research and methods, talking about, methodology from different, dimensions. We were talking about, Dr. Sabyasachi in the morning was talking about research and theory, methods and theory. There was talk about the feminist epistemology. There was talk about ethnography. I feel that, my lecture today kind of culminates, because while we are talking about theory and method, ultimately for all scholar, it kind of culminates in writing your grand thesis or your research paper. I think that's where I kind of come in, where I will be talking about academic writing. But before I start talking or enter into my lecture, I thought that it's a little important to kind of share with you my own engagements with academic writing. Why me for this talk? Where do I draw my theories and techniques of writing from? As Dr. Apeksha was mentioning, I worked at Ashoka University for almost 2 years as a writing tutor. If you know a little bit about Ashoka University, it's a liberal arts university, and there is a major thrust that is given to writing. The Center for Writing and Communication, as you can make out, from the name of the center itself, writing and communication. These two were the thrust areas of the center. And the center kind of, it is one of the largest center at Ashoka University. And we used to cater to the entire academic and non-academic circuit of the university. Wide range of work. We used to do a lot of stuff over there, but one of the major interventions or larger part of our work used to be these one-on-one sessions. I think most of what I'm going to talk about today, I kind of draw from my observations, my own engagements during these one-on-one sessions. So just to explain a little bit about what we used to do in these one-on-one sessions, students could book like a 1 hour long slot with us, with a tutor, and they would come to us at various stages of their writings. It could be right after professor had handed them out an assignment, which used to be called as prompts. And we would literally take it from the stage of brainstorming down to writing. But, and this is the very interesting part, the major portion of the time actually went in these initial sessions of brainstorming, just sitting over there. And we did the traditional way. I used to take a piece of paper, I used to take a pencil, and I used to literally scribble on the paper, trying to jot down all the ideas over there. And this is how we used to begin all these sessions. So the first 2 or 3 sessions with each scholar, student used to be, we used to talk about the topic. We used to kind of delve into the topic. We used to draw these, very, very extensive sort of an algorithm or a flow chart. And we used to try and get it down to a format after which writing was very, very easy. Now, most of what I'm going to talk about today, about this entire thing about blueprinting or outline, if you might want to call it that, is actually coming from my entire, experiences that I gathered from this process of, sitting together and, talking to these students before they started writing. So the pre-writing phase of the method of writing. And here I thought that, this quote this was a passage that really spoke to me. This is from Rowena Murray's How to Write a Thesis. This is a book that I will be extensively referring to, among others. I also have a bibliography at the end of my PPT, where you will be able to have a look at the kind of books that we usually, or I refer to. But what she says is that, most of us, we are just given this instruction to just write. The instruction to just write seems absurd, because most of us, we feel like we have not started anything, even after we are reading and thinking about a topic. And this phase, whatever we might want to call it, we might want to call it the writer's block. We might want to call it the phase where, things have not really fallen into place. This is that phase where, this can go on for months, which can become a very, very daunting sort of an experience. And I think the anxiety of writing kind of comes from this phase itself, where every time we sit down to write, we feel like we don't have anything substantial to say. Now, this is something, I think this is a kind of lacuna which is existing in the Indian educational system in general. Take school education, for example, where I think writing is kind of at the periphery of the educational system. In the syllabi, while we are talking about, rote learning, or we are talking about, recreating whatever is being told in class in our answer sheet, there is very few scope of critical engagement with a topic and critical writing. Now, coming from that sort of an environment with a very traditional thrust on education, when we come to colleges, to universities, and we are suddenly expected to produce this extremely, critical piece of writing, very original, where you're supposed to enter into an academic conversation, this becomes a very, very daunting exercise. So just to tell somebody, just write, is a very, very sort of an, absurd expectation to have out of research scholars. And this is not just for school students. I'm talking about, myself, when I joined Ashoka, I had just completed my PhD. And I did not enter the Center for Writing and Communication with all the tools of writing in place. It was mostly during these one-on-one sessions that I kind of realized that, this is the reason that I did something during my thesis writing, or this is something, I kind of end up doing every time. So these things are, things that you pick up while you're engaging, but the process of writing itself becomes so daunting that we take ages to enter that phase. So from there, that's where my entire lecture is, has been envisaged, where I'll be talking about the stage of blueprinting. And, when we are talking about methods of academic writing, we always give the least importance to this pre-planning or outlining stage. What I would like to say is that, I want to bring back this outlining phase or the pre-writing phase within the methods of writing, because I think it is as important. And, half your work is done in the outlining phase rather than, once you begin writing, because if you have your outline or your blueprint in place, then, half your work is done. I think this would be a nice place to kind of enter into Umberto Eco's quote about blueprinting. what he suggests is that one of the first things that you can do to begin writing your thesis is to first write the title, the introduction, and the table of contents. That is exactly what most authors do at the end. The advice seems paradoxical, because, and he kind of reasons over here that, the table of contents is something that you see for the very first time when you're approaching somebody's work, or even when you are reading your own work. Now, it kind of gives you a skeletal picture of what exactly you're going to talk about. So if it is giving you, if it is giving your reader a roadmap in approaching your thesis, it could also be a roadmap that you yourself can use while writing your own research. So I will be taking it from here while, Umberto Eco talks about blueprinting at the table of contents phase. What I will try and do is, I will try to divide academic writing into 3 major blocks. And I will deal with blueprinting at the macro level, the entire research writing, and at the mini or the micro level, which is the individual parts. And, I hope that, you'll see the benefits of such blueprinting, because imagine that your research writing is a building, is a house that you're building, and you have a blueprint right in front of you. Imagine you want to change the location of a room. Say you want to shift room number 1 in the space where room number 2 is. Isn't it much easier at the blueprinting stage than once after, the building has already been built, and then it's partially built, and then you are trying to, change the location? So think of it, approach it that way. And that's how I look at the blueprinting, the entire exercise of blueprinting within academic writing. And very much I see it as a part of methods of writing. And while Eco is talking only about table of contents, what I'll try and do, which I've already said, I'll try to place it against the entire block of research writing. Now, before we enter into that, there are these initial warming up stage. When we are talking about, we have that phase where we think that we have nothing to write. And it is a very, very serious stage, because that can go on forever and ever. So one of the first things that you can do, or something that, has worked always, is brainstorming. But the only thing is that for brainstorming, you always need somebody else to brainstorm with. But this is the sad truth of academics. As we start climbing higher and higher, I think our circuit keeps getting smaller and smaller. So the scope for interaction becomes so less that, hardly there is scope for actually sitting with a fellow research scholar and brainstorming. So brainstorming might be a very, very, interactive sort of a thing, but there are these other, solo activities that you can take up. Clustering is a very, very interesting way of kind of approaching research writing. And we'll get to outlining. You see, outlining is there at number 9. I will be getting to outlining. And when I talk about these warming up techniques, please do keep in mind that these are not exclusive of each other. And of course, writing itself, while there are these techniques that I can guide you through, writing itself can be very, very subjective. So yes, there are techniques, but ultimately it's you writing. So you will have to navigate through these various techniques and find the one that suits you the best. So customize these techniques according to the way that, you feel that you'll be able to do justice to your writing. So clustering itself is something where you connect visually. Just to give you a very, very, quick look at how clustering is done. This is a way that, we used to do at these one-on-one sessions. So we should just take a piece of paper, put down your main topic right at the center, and keep having these main points and sub points which are coming out of it. At this stage, you don't need to think too much. You just keep on writing whatever comes to your mind. It is only at a later stage that from here you keep on selecting. So editing out basically. So this is a way of clustering, which is connecting visually. But many of us, we don't really understand these visual cues. Many of us are not very, we are not very comfortable with this sort of a mind mapping. For them, free writing is a very, very important technique. Now, I was telling you about Rowena Murray's work, where she's talking about how to write a thesis. She mentions that free writing, the kind of free writing that she talks about, she's talking about this guy called Peter Elbow. Peter Elbow came up with this, technique of free writing in 1973. He also has a website. So in case you're looking for these, handouts, he has a lot of these handouts that he shares on his website. So in case you're looking for that, you can. I think I just put it in the chat box also, his name. It's Peter Elbow. Now, what he is essentially talking about is 5 minutes of just free writing without pausing to think about what you are writing, whether you're writing the right thing or not, whether it makes sense or not. So do not pause to edit, but write in full sentences. That is something that he keeps on saying, that you should write not in words, not in bullet points, but in full sentences. So you basically keep on writing for 5 minutes, then you stop, you take stock of the situation, then you go back to writing again. And again, it's a very, very solo activity. So the feeling of being judged, writing, rubbish, that these are things that don't really matter at this point of time. I actually, I was, when I was attending Dr. Sabyasachi's talk in the morning, Anuprita had asked a question that, when we are talking about research, we hardly talk about this aspect of storytelling, about this aspect of individuality, of subjectivity. So is research writing only factual? Is there no scope for, your own subjective intervention? It is just, is it just entering into an academic conversation and just, having a list of listing out academics? So Rowena actually mentions this kind of exercise that she did with free writers and people who are much more structured. So the structurers. And she has, in her book, if you get hold of her book, you'll see that she mentions these comments where structurers are very scared of free writing because they are always thinking in terms of structures, and free writing is far away from structuring. But a free writer writes that, when she started free writing, she realized that there was also a lot of scope of her own being that she could project into her writing. What you do with it, that subjectivity, that entire sense of morality, that own sense of your own little politically incorrect intervention into a particular topic, which we kind of say is not very important for academic writing, but it could be a valuable addition, is something that kind of enters into writing during this free writing stage. What you do with it, whether you keep it or not, because this is just the ideation stage, is up to you. But, this is one way where you can actually kind of put in yourself into your own thesis. Listing is something that all of us understand. We make copious lists. We fail to, kind of keep up to these lists. So think of these listing also in a similar fashion. Listing out things that you think you need to say, removing things from a list, adding more things to a list. Looping is again a very focused way of free writing where, so for clustering, you just write and you do not edit. For looping, you write you freely write for 5 minutes, then you take out the main seminal point from that passage and then build up your next passage from this one seminal, kind of this statement that you get from your first passage. So you form one loop, two loops, second loop, till you get to the final, passage that you come up with, which makes much more sense than the first passage of free writing that you do. Cubing is again very, very interesting. So, many of us, we kind of need a certain direction. We can't really start listing out until and unless there are these leading questions or prompts that project us into thinking in a particular way. So think of the research writing in the form of a cube with 6 sides. And there's this something which she says, she mentions, and here I'm talking about Murray, she talks about DC2A3 method, which is you describe, then you compare, then you classify, then you analyze, apply, and argue. So basically using these techniques to your own topic. So you have your own topic, and then you ask, you classify it under what category is it falling. So this is another way where you kind of have these, bullet points, and you keep on hitting your topic with these particular questions or from these particular perspectives. Questioning comes very easy to me. So, why am I writing this? How am I going to do this? What are the sources that I'm going to look at? This is a very, very interesting way. Drawing, sometimes even drawing helps. And, I've actually seen this happening where my students used to come up with sheets and used to, make this entire diagrammatic representation of their topic. And, that used to work really well. Finally, coming to outlining. And this is where, where my talk is going to my lecture is going to carry on from. Just a second. I think there's some sort of a disturbance. I don't know whether it's coming from my computer or not. Yeah.
Vasim sir, is it coming from technical stuff?
I think it's better now. Yeah.
Better? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry. So then finally coming to outlining. And like I was saying, this is the major thrust. I find outlining very, very helpful. And over here, while we are coming to outlining, these various methods that I kind of discussed with all of you over here does not need to be exclusive of each other. All of them can come together while you are doing your outlining. How does this outlining work? Or rather, I should say, how do I go about it? I basically break down my entire research into 3 major parts. And I'll do this because I know that there are people from various disciplines over here. So my entry into this is through the, through the cultural studies perspective. But I think this is something that kind of works for everybody. If you envisage your research into 3 blocks, and this could work at the level of a research paper too, and at the larger level of the thesis too. You have your introduction, you have your body, you have your conclusion. Now the introduction and the conclusion for a research paper would be 1 or 2 paragraphs each. The body need not be 1 paragraph. They could be as many paragraphs as possible. For your thesis, the introduction and the conclusion would be 2 different chapters, and the body would be the various other chapters that you write to kind of prove your thesis, which is there in your introduction. So we will proceed this way. While we are doing the micro outlining, we will be looking at research writing into these 3 major blocks, these 3 rooms that you have planned in your house. So the introduction, the body, and the conclusion, and how to go about it. If you want a pictographic kind of understanding of how your research looks like, this is the standard image. And this is something I'm sure everybody knows. You start with your acknowledgement, you start with your abstract. These are 2 individual identities which are exclusive of each other. So they are separately kind of blocked over here in different rectangles. Then you have this 1 major block. There is an introduction, there is method results, which is the body, then there is the conclusion. They are all interconnected. But if you see, introduction looks like an inverted pyramid, and the conclusion looks like a proper pyramid, like a proper triangle. And this is something which is very, very interesting, something that I kind of struggled a lot with as a research scholar, because we were taught to write introduction in these, flowery language, kind of giving the background and, kind of delving into the topic and giving a lot of information, which I was shocked to realize is not at all required. The introduction is not the place to go into all those details at all. It is basically like an upturned pyramid where you start with your general kind of an idea, and you kind of narrow it down to the tip of the pyramid, which would be your thesis or your major conclusion. And the rest of your methods and results go into just substantiating that particular thesis. If visual cues are something that you are not very good with, this is a very good way of kind of understanding this entire visual structure through sentences, through language. And you can actually take a screenshot of this one, because these are questions, these are very leading questions. These are prompts that will help you kind of channel your own writing of your introduction. This helps me a lot. And again, this is, I have taken this from Murray's book, How to Write a Thesis. What she does is that she divides it into humanities and social sciences, and for science and engineering, because the vocabulary that we use for the same, same part of the text or same component of writing would be a little different. So you begin with the subject of my research is. Now, the subject of your research is something which is a very, very general, it's a very, very broad sort of a thing. So again, the base of the pyramid, which is the broader part of the pyramid, you begin with that. That is your introduction, the very, very beginning sentence of your introduction. Or if you're thinking in terms of your thesis, how you're planning your introductory chapter. It merits study because my work relates to others in that the research question is. These are all coming from your literature review. So you're basically, we keep telling about how academic writing is entering into this conversation, this larger conversation where you are, it's like, imagine that entering into a party and that there are these, different blocks of people who are just standing there and having a conversation, and you enter into a group and you want to enter into the conversation. So you kind of, do a bit of a kind of, you see what are they talking about, and then you pick it up from one speaker, and then you carry it on into your own, whatever your views are, and then somebody else carries it on from there. Similarly, academic writing is just like that. So you pick up the strands of where you are going to begin from somebody else's research, from somebody else's opinion. And from there, while you are moving into your own research, you are formulating your own research question. So it is all, that is the reason that, literature review is given so much of an importance, because it kind of, in your own head also gives you the structure in which you can progress. Moving from there, you come to methods, where you ask the question, or you rather, kind of state that you approached whatever your research question is from a perspective of. So what method are you using? Are you using close reading? Are you using a quantitative analysis? What sort of, what is your way of entering into this conversation? What are you basing your entire claims on? And after you did that, your results, when I did that, I found, you fill that up. What I think that means is, that is your discussion. And finally, the conclusion, there are implications for what does it, mean? How can you take it forward? So I feel like this is a very, very interesting way of, kind of entering into this conversation. And you see IMRAD written over there at the bottom. Now, this is something, this is one of those little cues that you can use to remember: introduction, method, research, and discussion. So this is how you should go about while you are writing any piece of research writing, be it a smaller research essay or a larger thesis. Now, while we are talking about outlining, one thing that is very, very important is that to kind of use a pattern that is easily recognizable, like, other people will be able to understand that, because there is very, very little scope of, random writing. That is something that, other people might not be able to follow. So even when you're outlining, when you're doing this entire thing about, the introduction to the body, to the conclusion, there are particular techniques that, most people use that work very, very well. Umberto Eco, when he talks about these techniques, he talks about how, for a historical research, we often end up, outlining in a very chronological fashion. When, say, if it is a very, very experimental sort of a research, in that sense, we kind of end up using a very inductive sort of a reasoning, where we kind of, we give the evidences first, and then we go on to propose a theory. We also use deductive, planning, where you kind of give your theory first and then you give its application. There is the cause and effect plan. There is a compare and contrasting plan. So there are various ways that you can think about giving a structure to your own writing. And that depends exactly, like absolutely on you, absolutely on the discipline that you're coming from and the kind of thesis or the kind of work that you desire to do. So over here, there is a list of these that, these very, very easily, often seen kind of a pattern of organization. You begin with a simple idea, you move to the, complex ideas. You begin with the weakest claims and then you move to the strongest claims. They seem so basic, but these are things most people, like, I don't know about all of you, but I used to really struggle with just in understanding. Like, we did have a research methodology classes. We had our, this to writing itself. It was just a, it was a complete, I don't know how to put it, very, very daunting. So, these kind of, they're very, very basic, but they kind of help you enter into this conversation. Just take it in a chronological fashion, or, move from simple to complex, or you treat some topics early in the text because, readers would already know about those things, and then move on to the newer grounds that you are trying to cover. So always try, while you're outlining, always try to outline in a fashion that also gives it a structure that is easily not only understandable by you, but also comprehensible by other people who are approaching your writing. Moving on to that, now let's take the first chunk, introduction. But introduction is, it's always best to be left to be written right at the end of your thesis or your research paper. And here I will be slightly deviating from what Echo was kind of saying, because he does also keep on mentioning that introduction is as important as outlining. And he does mention that it doesn't mean that the introduction is going to be a final piece of work. You will constantly keep on changing your introduction. But I feel like, you only have a complete idea of how your introduction will be after you have written all your chapters or after you've written the entire paper. So it's best to kind of go back to your introduction right at the end, but nonetheless, it might be best to kind of talk a little bit about what an introduction might mean. It is, undoubtedly the most important paragraph of your essay. Basically, it is acting like a blueprint within a blueprint for your readers, for you yourself. Anybody who's reading your entire paper should be able to understand what you're trying to do right from the introductory paragraph itself. After you're done writing your paper and then your introduction, when you go back to your introduction, it is a checklist for you to kind of, find out if you've done everything that you intended to do. So it's a very, very important paragraph. It is, kind of setting the scene, introducing the central idea, and it is stating your thesis. And we spoke about the inverted pyramid. So it is moving from the general to the specific. How to structure it. Now, while we talk about, we do know these various ways how to arrange it, but how to begin writing. And this is something that we used to use a lot of these exercises